But that's just more for finance.
All right, good morning, everybody. Let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to the November 4th, 2024 Grants Pass City Council Workshop. We're going to get started with a presentation about private street standards.
Good morning, Council. Happy Monday, members of the City Council. I'm not Brad, substituting for Brad this morning. We returned back to the office by the end of the week. So I'm picking up the discussion regarding the Home Builders Association, also known as HBA, in the City Council joint meeting, and continuing the item regarding private street standards. And you recall that this item was a continuance from the October meeting. Subject, again, continued discussion with HBA related to increased residential density on private streets, the relationship to county council goals, maintain, operate, and expand our infrastructure to meet community needs, and provide cooperative shared leadership involving the council, staff, and community. Again, the HBA had submitted to staff in November of 22 certain items for staff to look at. One of them is private streets. I won't read this, but this was picked up from the October meeting, and this is kind of the framework which we have been working on, or the council has been working on. I'm not going to summarize all these points, but since May, obviously the public utility easements, the fire lane enforcement, and that third bullet is where we stand this morning, bringing back this item back to council for staff recommendation. And again, a summary of these May 14th workshop items. Brad had summarized these the last meeting, and I'll just quickly jump forward to this morning, where the last meeting in October, the council expressed some reservation of allowing 20 units on a 20-foot width private street, and the council requested fire planning staff to review and propose a recommendation, of which we have prepared one this morning. As a reminder, our current standards, I think Brad spoke to this, Tier 1, Tier 2. It's those last items, private streets at 2 to 4 units is what we call our Tier 1. It stands at up to 4 units on a 20-foot width with no sidewalk. Our Tier 2 is our private streets up to 10 units with a 22-foot paving width and a required 4-foot sidewalk. And since the council meeting in October, we had a chance. We, being planning staff and the fire chief Sanchez, we appreciate his willingness to meet with staff, planning staff as well, but we have come forward with a recommendation that's right behind me. For the Tier 1, we initially provided a 1 to 3 unit cap at 20 foot with 20 feet paving width with no sidewalk. That 3 unit cap was pursuant to speaking to Chief Sanchez in terms of being consistent with fire code. Since then, we staff, which was the fire department, planning department, and we met with Justin and Gail on Friday afternoon, and there was a request to up that from the HBA to up that to 4 units. And so there is a willingness this morning to go up to 4 units. Before I'll wrap up that recommendation, but I'll just jump down to the private streets standard, which recommendation that we provided to HBA and we put forth this morning. I'll jump down to private street standards, allowing up to 20 units on a minimum paving width of 26 feet. Within that 26 feet, we would require a sidewalk, and that required sidewalk can be on one side, but it would need to be built to a specification that would be rolled, and that will allow for the support of a 75,000 fire apparatus or a fire truck. And this is the recommendation for Tier 2, and this is different from the current code, but this is allowance up to 20 units, requiring a 26-foot width, one-sided sidewalk, 4-foot sidewalk, but with a rolled curb that is able to support a fire apparatus. So that's the recommendation that we put forth as a staff to HBA, the Home Building Association, HBA, on Friday, and that's something that, that Justin and Gail agreed to as well, but I will let them respond to that. But that's the compromise or the recommendation, both from staff with HBA's approval as well. So those are the 2 recommendations. I think I'll go back to that first recommendation, that Tier one recommendation, namely 20 foot with no sidewalk up to 4 units. We originally proposed 3, and not to confuse things, that was just kind of lining up with the fire code. But subsequently, since we met with the HBA on Friday, there is an agreement to go up to 4 units. However, like any other project that would be proposed to staff, it all has to meet fire code or OFC. So that is the recommendation before you this morning. And to the next steps, affirming the language this morning, staff will bring back to you a draft code text amendment to these new standards, and we would do so by the early 2025. The fire apparatus access road in municipal code continues on. I'm not prepared to speak to that this morning, however, I'm sure when Brad comes back, we'll pick up that conversation. And the call to action this morning is to council's discretion, and if there are alternatives or further discussions, I'm happy to answer those questions now. But that wraps up kind of a brief summary of bringing back a recommendation to council this morning.
Thanks, Mark. Council, do you have questions? Brian?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I just had one question about the 1 to 3 or the 1 to 4 units. I understand that, but you just, at the end there, you said something about has to meet fire code. And so if fire code is 3 units and 4 units is not fire code, how do we get around that?
Thank you. That's a great question. First, to the whole team, Mark and his team, Brad's team, and everything that we met with, and the HBA, we're working with them, the whole Builders Association. It was a great time to meet with all of them and talk and discuss through this. The way that the fire code works, it's not a one fits all. We can't blanket statement. So having to meet the OFC, the Oregon Fire Code, there's things that they can do in their building, and we had this discussion as we were all sitting together too, that if they added residential sprinklers, then we're a lot more likely to be like, okay, well, you don't have to meet the minimum requirement of the 20 feet because now there's that extra gallons per minute. There's like the likelihood of it burning down are a lot less. Or if it's got 2 access, if it's on a gridded street system and we can attack it from both sides, or the back is on a public street and the front is on a private street, then we're able to get more personnel there, more gallons per minute, and we'd be able to mitigate that easier. So that's why when you go with the Oregon Fire Code, it's not a one size fits all. So that's why we came to the agreement. If it's up to the Oregon Fire Code, then we should be able to do this no problem. We're all working together and it comes across our desk.
Okay, great. Thank you.
No problem.
Any other questions right now? Valerie?
I'm just clarifying that with the middle, that could be duplex or triplex, is that correct? So that each of those units could actually be a duplex, correct?
Correct.
I'm just wondering,
Right.
I mean, I know that goes way back, but I'm just clarifying in my mind.
Correct. I
what
think
we're
that was
talking,
the
that's fine.
discussion point from last.
Yes, okay, thank you.
Any other questions right now? All right. Home Builders Association, did you want to say anything on this?
Good afternoon, council, staff. Appreciate, again, letting us come today, just hopefully close out this discussion point. As Chief mentioned, we had a great meeting on Friday just to kind of talk through all this stuff. Obviously, this is kind of the culmination of a few discussions this year, a couple of visits here at council workshops. And, you know, originally our goal here was to at least accommodate duplexes where single family traditionally would be allowed. And the private street standards didn't account for that. I think this agreement to basically take the current, what is the current 5 to 10 unit standard with a 26-foot wide street total with the rolled curbs or the sidewalk on it, thickening that sidewalk and allowing us to go up to 20 units has accomplished that goal for the larger street standards. So now we essentially, if somebody chose to, they would be able to do duplexes where single family would traditionally be allowed. As mentioned, Fire Chief had recommended 3 units on their existing private street. Keeping in mind the existing private street standard allows 4 units. So that's why we said, well, hey, we really don't want to go backwards here. I think moving forward on new projects, this proposal accomplishes the goal that we originally had, because moving into a project, you know what the standard is and you know what you need to do. The only standards that aren't being addressed, I think, are existing private streets. and existing lots on private streets. I don't think there's a lot of them out there, but there are some that I know with some of the builders have approached us and they said, hey, we'd really like to build duplexes on the 20-foot private street. Can we do that? And we haven't been able to. So I don't know, you know, again, this is all big negotiation. I think this has gone well for all parties. I don't know if there's any allowances that council would be willing to make on existing platted private streets to allow additional units for duplexes. But that would be the only other request I'd have right now to really hopefully close this out. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Justin?
I just
Yeah.
want you to explain a little bit more for those of us who don't have the visual that you do of a place that has an existing lot there that says, say, it's a private street, so right now it could have up to,
Four units. So
four
a 20-foot private street.
right, a 20-foot
Yes.
could currently have 3, and so you're saying that they couldn't put a duplex on that, or they could?
Yeah, so so we've got several builders in town over the last years that have done private streets with 4 lots. So 20-foot pavement, 4 lots, often 2 on each side. And in that case, you're only allowed, per the current code, 4 dwelling units total on that 20-foot private street. So that was one of the main reasons this topic came up in the first place, was people were
Right.
wanting to do duplexes. So today, with the current proposal that's in front of you right now, that would not allow any additional units on those existing private streets. It would just be single family. So that would be that's why I said our only other request that we wanted to throw out there for consideration is potentially
But,
allowing.
and let me clarify, but if a new person came in to do 4, they could put duplexes, or they could?
They would have to go to the larger private streets standard that's
Okay.
on the board in front of you, right?
Okay. Okay, so I guess I'm not quite sure how to address that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only recommendation we would put before council is maybe allowing existing private street lots some flexibility on adding additional units on that 20-foot standard.
It would basically be, if council made that policy decision, you'd be making a policy decision to provide authorization to approve non-conforming use of a certain subdivision. So it'd be a non-conforming thing that we'd have to approve. So that's a public policy decision by council on if we would do something like that.
Is there an opportunity right now to request an appeal for a non-conforming property?
I don't know. I think on our street standards in the development, I don't think you'd be able to increase the density with an appeal on that, but maybe Mark can answer that question.
Yeah, we would, so currently, if there's a request to exceed, there's no necessarily appeal right at this moment. But in terms of the HAB, the Housing Building Association's request for us to take a look at existing conditions before we bring forward a text amendment, we can certainly look at that as an opportunity to define kind of a private street or the current existing conditions.
So it's not there's no path for them to request an exemption on a case-by-case basis right now?
Not right now in terms of.
Okay. Rick?
Would there be the opportunity to use the variance procedure, or would it be disqualified because it's self-imposed in other words, the variance would be to the front yard setback when you go to the larger street? So would that work?
We wouldn't necessarily utilize the variance, but we can certainly look at, again, existing conditions for existing streets, 20 feet with 4 lots, and look at if those are all, for example, turned into duplexes, that would be up to 8 units. We can certainly kind of look at that more.
So what I'm hearing you saying, we have the ability to add an addition to the ordinance that would recognize that situation through the variance procedure?
Not through a variance. I think we would look at the standard now and look at defining existing conditions, existing streets. I think that was kind of what HAB was.
Yeah,
seeking.
I think if there was some allowance to look at existing, as the chief mentioned, oftentimes these 4 lot 20-foot private streets are 2 lots that have technically dual frontage, like one's on the main street and one's on the interior street. So, and this is, of course, would be up to public safety, but in those situations, your outer units would be able to be fought from the street. And if you had 2 duplexes in the back, you'd have 4 units off the 20-foot street in the back from a firefighting perspective. So, yeah, if there was some flexibility in the code for existing private street conditions on a case-by-case basis, that'd be something that we definitely would encourage.
Aaron?
That help from maybe the discussion questions. As mentioned, this would be, I think maybe council might want to have some additional information on what the true impact is. How many 20-foot right-of-ways do we have that this could potentially be? Because having a public policy where you are providing existing streets that are 20 feet wide to conform or to increase density on something that you've decided is not best for the community moving forward is a potential public policy conflict. And so I would think that maybe getting some additional impact on what that actually means to the community would be important for council, as this is a decision on what's more important from a policy standpoint. Is it safety and being able to perform and respond based on density levels, or is it the higher density that you want, and which one trumps the other? And it may be that there's only 2 out there and it's not worth the policy discussion. It could be that there's 54 out there and it can mean this amount of density. So you may want some additional information before making a decision on that.
Did you have a question, Brian?
Not anymore.
Okay. Rick?
So I see additional information in the future would be essential, and that would need to be decided today on the issues that are facing us. And in the future, I think it would be important for the fire chief to indicate what conditions he would want to have there, in that presentation, like if it's access and sprinklers and so forth. But I agree, we don't need to get into that today.
Any other questions?
Well, and Mayor, just as I will reiterate, though, we are happy with the proposal that is up here. I think we're accomplishing the goal of allowing duplexes or potentially ADUs on some of these private streets moving forward with future projects. So I definitely don't want to stifle that discussion, because I think that's a positive thing, because this was truly just the last component of it was existing private streets.
Thank you. And it sounds like we don't have that information readily available about how many private streets there are.
No, we would need to bring that back to you in terms of the tier 1, the private street standards for up to 4 units on a 20-foot width.
All right. Any other questions for Mark? Nope. Okay. Council, what do you want to do with this? You ready to move forward? DJ?
Sure, I don't see a problem with the recommendations. However, the impetus for this conversation was to encourage infill on existing streets. I maintain that it's still possible to do. I can say again, given middle housing, you can do a 20-foot wide street and put 100 houses back there if you wanted to. So says the state. So really this conversation is about encouraging infill. And if our decision today makes it better for developers to create higher density private roads, then so be it. We've come to a different conclusion here, and that's fine. So no problem with it.
I guess my question is, do we need to just approve it so that it can be approved at a meeting? Is that this next step? That's my understanding, correct? Is that we just need to
If you're ready to move it forward, I think so.
Yeah, as is, and then, like I said, just down the road, if there's a real problem that comes up because of builders on existing streets, then we'll deal with that then. But right now, move it forward as is.
If that's council's recommendation, we
Yes.
could.
I don't know if we need a motion or we can just do it, put it on.
Well, we
the-
just need direction
Okay.
from council today to move this to a future business meeting.
Yeah, and that's what I would
And then
recommend.
if you want to address the current private roads separately, then you could do that. Or if you'd like to have it together as you need, you could do that also.
I personally would like to see this move ahead right away for them.
Okay, sounds like they are ready to move forward with the recommendation here.
They don't need to kick it, I know.
Do you want to request any more information at this time about the private streets, or are we just going to move forward with this as is? DJ?
I'm personally not in favor of creating some sort of discretionary appeal process. We need clear and objective standards, and that's my bottom line.
Okay. Then we're going to move forward with putting this on the business meeting as is, and I think we are done with this topic for today, right? All right. Thanks, Mark, and Home Builders Association for being here. We're going to move on to our third quarter work plan update. Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
All right. Good afternoon, Mayor, Council. It's a great honor for me to be able to provide you with our strategic plan update for the third quarter. It's an effort that is taken yourself as providing policy direction, our highly trained and quality staff that we have, and then the community in order to get some of these things accomplished that we have in our strategic plan. So that's why I say it's an honor, is it's a culmination of a lot of people working together in order to accomplish our goals. You're familiar with our strategic planning process, but we do have the strategic plan drive our goals and also drive our budget. So we make sure that allocated resources are going to the highest priorities that council has determined. We provide a tracking system through SMART goals, so we have a good idea of where we're going and how we're getting there and when we're accomplishing those items, and we monitor those specific objectives and tasks associated with the goals. You have 5 primary goals within your strategic plan, and those are behind me there, that are supported by 15 objectives and then further supported by 22 different actions. So let's highlight some of the items for the third quarter. One is the Hillcrest Station project. At its August 25th workshop, we did provide some additional information for council regarding the Hillcrest Fire Station, and we're moving forward with getting you additional information. Actually, there's a council memo on the dais today that is focused on some additional information you requested for Hillcrest Fire Station. So we're continuing to make progress on that. And again, just to remind you, we're looking at what to do with Hillcrest Fire Station with regards to rehabilitating it or looking at a new location, or how are we going to continue to provide services, quality services to our community, along with quality location for our staff to reside and provide that service. Continuing under enhancing community safety, objective 3, posture grants pass to be a leader in addressing homelessness, mental health, drug addiction, and other related. Our action number 1 is explore opportunities for the city to bolster mental health and drug addiction. We've done some great things with regards to following the decriminalization of hard drugs. Measure 110, as you may recall, had some very negative impacts on communities throughout the state of Oregon. With that modification, we've been able to look at a number of things and really focus on deflection programs to get individuals that are having problems with drug addiction and others to try to get them the help that they need instead of criminalizing it. We've been working with a number of entities throughout our community in order to implement a deflection program, and we are tentatively set to launch that on December 1st. Continuing, explore opportunities to bolster mental health. Housing and neighborhood specialists did participate in UCAN's point-in-time contact planning meeting. This is an important aspect for communities across the state, which provides us those point-in-time count data that's directly tied to funding opportunities for our communities. And we're an active partner in helping that success. Action 2, work with state and local partners to establish homeless shelter. On August 23rd, the mayor did host a roundtable meeting with local nonprofits and social service providers to better gauge their current needs and levels of commitment to start up and operate some kind of long-term or low-barrier shelter, and identify how the city can best partner and leverage public resources and make those improvements. So the leadership and the mayor helped provide that opportunity in that meeting. Our housing and neighborhood specialists did draft and publish an RFP for ARPA funding to provide emergency warming shelters for bad weather this year also. So we had some funds that went for that, and we had funds last year that went for that same service for a warming shelter. Individuals like Mint, groups like Mint and stuff took advantage and was able to utilize some of those funds. Under provide cooperative shared leadership involving council staff and the community, we have develop and implement community communication strategy. Our housing and neighborhood specialists publish their social media posts educating the public on our statewide funding programs when it comes to heat pumps, incentives, mortgage relief, home improvement funds, as well as annual advertising of our block grant dollars that we have. Those have been very successful. As you're aware, that a number of the programs that we've had in years past, we've had some difficulty spending all the money, and this year and in the past couple of years, people really recognize the benefit of these programs that the block grant program has provided, and we're getting weatherization monies, et cetera, out there to the needed individuals, and it's working quite well. So we actually have a very highly efficient and effective community development block grant program going right now. Housing Neighborhood Specialist did update the housing landing page to include a home ownership resource section, which we encourage you to take a look at. What that does is it does list programs that assist in home purchases, as well as programs that assist in ongoing home ownership. So we're trying to provide some additional good information for individuals that are looking at either being a first-time buyer or wanting to become a homeowner again. Continuing down these actions, our information coordinator continues to work with community development to make more information available to people that utilize community service, our community development services. Staff created flyers and postcards to distribute to the community, as well as created QR codes that were added to flyers and cards. The QR codes direct people to more information posted online, making it more available to people without having to print several pages of information. QR codes were also utilized during the recent Art Along the Rogue festival. Staff created festival guides that include that, and we're trying to utilize that technology more because it's being utilized everywhere, from in the movie theaters to presentations to whatever. It's just an easy go-to, and people are utilizing that. So the easier we can get them that information or how to get there, the better. Continuing on this, implementation actions, the city website has been redesigned with a launch date set for mid-November. So we're real excited about that. This is a group effort that we've had to take a look at how we can make our website look better, easier to navigate, where people can get the information they need quicker, and also it be pleasing to the eye, and we are accomplishing that. So we're excited about that launch date. Under encourage economic opportunities, facilitate the environment to encourage business prosperity and economic opportunities. Action number 1, designate a portion of the transient lodging tax to fund tourism-related projects was one of your goals. The Fall 24 grant cycle opened July 1 and closed August 13th. The grant review subcommittee reviewed 3 applications and made a recommendation to council to fund 2 of the 3. Council awarded a total of $10,000 for 2 projects by resolution on September 18th, providing an opportunity for individuals to utilize some of our transient lodging tax dollars to help increase tourism. Staff provided a memo and a final report for the spring 2023 grant cycle. Enhance the Central Business District, create a permanent plaza downtown. We are continuing to make strides on this. This has been a multi-year project, and it's exciting that we're getting to a place where we can actually see what it might look like and what might be needed to go in to make this a reality. Economic Development has also launched a Buy a Brick campaign to raise some additional funds and provide some community spirit opportunities for people to purchase a brick that will be in that plaza area. Develop proactive solutions to community development challenges. Action 1, increase available buildable lands inventory. In the third quarter, staff along with the consultant on the UGB land exchange program met with property owners on both the inclusion and exclusion property list. The results of these meetings will be included with the final project by the end of the year, December 2024. Provides an opportunity for those that want to get into the urban renewal area, the urban growth boundary, in order to provide for bigger densities can do that, and those that don't need to. So it's going to be a real positive for those property owners to have that choice to come in if they so desire. Staff is working with property owners on the annexation and confirming zoning with each property owner. who have the petition to be annexed in the city limits. Upon completion, public hearings, Urban Area Planning Commission and Council will be scheduled in December, so you'll make some positive policy decisions and then follow along with the guidelines of who wants to be added in and annexed will be able to do so. And it's an efficiency aspect from the community members also, because we're going to sort of be doing it all at once. So that's another positive. Action number 2, develop a program to incentivize smaller footprint homes. Staff presented a draft middle housing infill development program to the Housing Advisory Committee. The goals of the program were as follows, but really it's really to try to get additional densities and be able to provide an opportunity for those infill lots to be better utilized and developed easier. Action 3, develop programs which incentivize increased density development. In the third quarter, staff did finalize and recommend height increases for all zones, including residential, commercial, and industrial. Additionally, staff has added buffer zones to ensure building height impact on existing residential neighborhoods is mitigated as much as possible. Those are some things that we've dealt with. You've had some concerns about solar shading and those kind of things, because you have to really look at how increased height might affect your neighborhood. But by increasing the height, you will be able to increase the density with new development. Under encourage environment, under facilitates sustainable manageable growth, we've got action 1, support and encourage the development of 225 units of housing per year. You may recall I sent a little note to you about we've got on the books over 400 homes that you as council have helped incentivize through a number of ways, including some assistance financially through different funding sources. It's been very successful, whether it be our community excise tax, whether it be ARPA dollars or other funds. Council, you've done a great job in incentivizing a new array of home ownership in our community. On August 21st, we awarded Nebraska Trail Apartments $241,000. On August 21st, we did these other items also. We had Ellenwood Townhomes of $238,000. We had Hillcrest Veterans Village at $700,000. And this money really is utilized as seed money to help incentivize other public and private dollars in order to get housing in our community. And it is a really good first step, and it's making a big impact. Now, some people might not see the homes immediately because now they have to be built and they have to go through the planning process. So we have 400 homes on the books that you've incentivized, and they'll be coming online between now and 3 years from now. Objective 1, plan and develop infrastructure. Continuing along this line, develop Spalding Industrial Site. Design work is continued, and staff will be reviewing 60% plans for the project. We'll continue to seek out dollars to help fund this project in order for us to accomplish this and get our industrial land shovel ready. We are lacking to some degree in industrial land, so this is a key point for us to be able to get this to where it can be marketable and services are provided. Under operate and expand infrastructure, meet community needs, plan and develop infrastructure. We've got our downtown lighting project. Staff received cost estimates for the OWL parking lot. Economic development staff is developing a by the brick program to help with the plaza development and how that will work together. Ensure bicycle and pedestrian path needs are met. Action 1 is to identify opportunities to improve safety and fluidity of multimodal facilities. A Rogue River Greenway open house was held in the council chambers this quarter and had really good public turnout. The consultant is finalizing the technical memorandum to identify Rogue River Highway as a preferred route. So the goal is ultimately for us to have a greenway from Grants Pass all the way down to Ashland type of thing. So it looks like we're taking steps and we're getting a little closer to that. Ensure park infrastructure needs are met. We have done a few things. Dollar Mountain Trail construction started, and there's some trails that are just great right now. You can go explore. We're doing some good progress on that. We have our movement inclusive playground feature installed, and that's exciting. If you haven't taken a look at that, that's at Eckstein Park. Reinhardt Volunteer Park, Agents of Discovery launched, and council-approved design for Caveman Pool. So there's a number of really neat projects that are going on right now in our park system, and it's exciting to see. Enhancing opportunities to promote character and community spirit. Acquire Main Street certification. The Downtown Steering Committee applied to be a connected community with Oregon Main Street. This is a big step. Oregon Main Street provides a great opportunity and guidelines for communities to really provide additional life and funding and direction when it comes to your main streets. As you know, Grants Pass has a great downtown. People throughout Southern Oregon talk about how great our downtown community is, our restaurants, our shops, our boutiques, and people come from all over just to explore our downtown area. The Main Street program will only bolster and continue to make that even stronger. Our committee chair updates our advisory committees and is scheduled to present to the HBSC and the City Council. The Main Street Grants Pass group will do their first community outreach cleanup event on October 2nd. Of course, they did that, but that was in the third quarter, and they're making and continuing to make great strides in the Main Street program. Objective 5, reduce carbon emissions and increase climate resiliency. Action 1, utilize energy efficiency and conservation grant funds to complete a solar feasibility study. Staff received the final report. All sites are feasible, but not cost effective for solar is what the report was. We also performed electrical vehicle charging feasibility and select conversion for city fleet. Staff will be waiting on the draft EV transition plan. This is the first such plan prepared by Pacific Power. So that'll be an interesting project. And my final slide is dealing with ensuring tree infrastructure needs are met, and trees have been ordered for the memorial tree canopy and downtown tree planting. So we continue to make progress on that. You may have seen up and down 7th Street and in other areas a number of new trees that are being planted in the tree wells that didn't used to have them. So we are increasing our inventory of trees in Grants Pass. And so with that concludes my report. I do want to say that some of these things have fingerprints of everyone in the community, including staff and council, you for your policy direction in order to accomplish these things. But as you see, you and we as an organization are making a positive impact on people's lives with the policies that you're providing direction on. With that, it concludes my report.
Thanks, Aaron. Good report. Council, do you have any questions?
I do.
Valerie?
Yeah, a couple of questions that came up when you were going through. So the deflection program is planned on December 1st, correct? And that is utilizing our sobering center. Am I correct? And the DA is on board for working through that, and that's all been okay.
Yeah, Chief, do you want to talk a little more about the deflection program?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question, Councillor. A tremendous program. We committed ourselves to a deflection model when the state legislature were working through decriminalization. This is not just a GP thing. It's a Josephine County thing with all of our partners, to include government and nonprofit. This is going to be pushed significantly more through Grants Pass Police, obviously because of the amount of people that we come in contact with. The Sobering Center has since hired what we call a case manager. So the idea is for my team and or anybody in law enforcement to drop the individual off at the Sobering Center, give them to the case manager, and the case manager will then redirect and guide that individual towards the most appropriate path into a service appropriately treatment option. We will have for GP a 3 strikes and you're out model, and then we will not deflect after that and we'll just go straight to arrest. But it is totally discretionary between the officer and the contact and voluntary with the individual. They do not have to go to deflection if they don't want to.
Okay, thank you. I also brought up about the RFP. Has the RFP been put out for the ARPA funding for the center, for this year's warming emergency weather shelter?
Yes.
And have we received?
I'm a user. The deadline is this Friday. So essentially, yeah, we'll have, hopefully that wrapped up by next week in terms of applications reviewed and hopefully a recommendation coming forward.
Okay, great, thank you. And my third question was, when is the new cycle for the spring grant cycle open for the transient lodging tax? Because I know the one for the winter, the fall one closed. When does the spring one open?
The emergency warming shelter?
No,
The transient lodging tax
Sorry about that, I'm
to
flipping
support
through here.
local tourist
Oh,
projects.
Sorry, I'm not aware of that one.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll have to
It's
ask
sometime in the
Dana.
spring.
Okay, I'll talk to Dana. I'll see Dana tomorrow, thank you. Okay, those are my questions.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Brian?
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. Sounds like a lot of good stuff's happening. I had a question on slide 16, where it talks about developing program to incentivize smaller footprint homes, and staff presented a infill development program to the housing committee. Just wondering what the next step is of that. I'm not totally in the loop on this, but it sounds like there's something happening there, and I'm not sure totally where it's at.
Sorry, we're essentially providing those recommendations ideally to, they receive comment and then we have to move forward whether or not there are any development code text amendments that we need to make in terms of these incentives. I don't have them in front of me at this moment. They're all kind of jumbled in terms of all our funding, but I know certainly we've received some feedback from HAC and now the kind of a staff level determination of how to implement them thereafter.
Okay, yeah, I'm just wondering, I don't know when or if council needs to be on the loop in that stuff or not, but it just kind of jumped out at me a little bit.
Sure. No, and as mentioned, I think we're just gathering the input from the different advisory committees so we can bring up a potential policy suggestion to you.
Okay, that sounds good. I had two other really quick things. I like the Buy a Brick campaign for the plaza. I think that's great for community buy-in and getting a little bit of revenue for that project. We might also be able to do something similar with Caveman Pool. So tuck that into your cap there and think about that for that project.
Okay.
And then the last thing, I was just going to ask if you'd be willing to send out the solar feasibility report to council so we could review that. Okay.
You bet.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Val?
I have a couple more later on, now that I flip through. Okay, so we're looking great for 2025. I mean, I am very excited about all the incentivizing we're doing. I was just curious how we're doing on the 2024. I know we had, was it 55 or 51 units for Cathedral Hill? And then, of course, there's been some building. I was just wondering where we were progress-wise on reaching our 225 units in 2024.
What our actual number is
Yes,
of what's
yeah,
been developed.
yeah,
And
yeah.
like I said, we sent the report that there's 400 on the
Yes,
books,
yes,
potentially
but-
on the books, but how many have actually been developed?
Yeah, I was just wondering, because I'm assuming those will count in 2025 and 2026, because they're not counted until they're occupied. And I do know Cathedral Hills has been occupied this year, so there's the 51. I was just wondering
Yeah.
whether those also include, single-family houses or duplexes or other things that have been. I'm assuming that does, correct?
We can provide you a report, our reports provide you with some of the housing
Yeah.
that we have, or new housing that's come online. I can resend that out to council.
Yeah, I think I might have seen it, but I was just curious if you had it, because I do think.
I don't
you
have
saw
it in my head.
Okay, okay. And then one other thing is I do know that the ODOT has, in the planning stage, they're in this planning stages for the 6th and 7th bicycle loop, that they're trying to figure out how to make that work in the north end of town. So, I do know that that is happening in the background. It's not something that's here, but there is, from my experience working on the Mid-Road Metropolitan Planning Organization, they have been talking about the fact that they have been in the process of looking for that, of how best to do that. So.
Yeah, and ODOT's, we had a meeting, Jason, myself, and Wade had a meeting with a number of ODOT reps, and we talked about a number of improvements that they're looking at wanting to do on 6th and 7th Street. It's not directly in here because it's not a direct action or objective that we're taking charge of. Like you said, it is ODOT. And so we're there as a partner for them, to provide feedback to them. they didn't go into a lot of detail about the multimodal on 6th and 7th Street. They were looking at more, here's an idea of where we're thinking about putting some rapid flashing beacon crossings and maybe an extra signalized light on 7th Street. So that's why it's not directly in here as an objective for us.
Okay, thanks. I think that's it, for sure.
I do have an answer to one of your questions that we missed. So from Dana, I got an email. The next tourism grant round opens January 1st, and it'll close mid-March.
Any other questions? All right, thanks for the report.
Thank you, Mayor,
and
Council.
Good work this quarter. Next up, we have FEMA's pre-implementation compliance measures.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just going to cue this up and actually do a brief introduction to our new Associate Planner, Lori Middleton. Lori joins us from New Braunfels, Texas. However, she has Rogue Valley roots in terms of her husband. So we are, you recall, Donna Rupp had retired last June, and during our recruitment, we were lucky to bring on Lori. Her transition to our department has been seamless. And one of her roles in our department is our floodplain manager. So she'll be presenting this to you this morning, or this afternoon, excuse me. Without further ado.
Thank you, Mark. Good afternoon, Mayor, Council. Lori Middleton, Associate Planner, Community Development Department. This morning, or this afternoon, we're going to talk about the Endangered Species Act integration into the National Flood Insurance Program for FEMA Region 10 in Oregon. FEMA is integrating requirements. In particular, the EPA requires the protection of threatened salmon and steelhead habitat. Full implementation is currently estimated by FEMA in 2027. In the meantime, FEMA is requiring local governments that wish to maintain eligibility for the flood insurance program to select one of 3 pre-implementation compliance measures. There are 31 counties in Oregon affected by these changes and include all river systems with migratory fish species on the threatened and endangered list. The City of Grants Pass participates in the flood insurance program, saving property owners flood insurance costs. FEMA, in cooperation with the National Marine Fisheries Service and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, have developed a plan to implement changes to the NFIP in affected jurisdictions, and participating communities have to select a pre-implementation compliance measure by December 1st, 2024. Relationship to council goals provide cooperative shared leadership involving council, staff, and community, and facilitate sustainable manageable growth. Background on this issue: in 2016, the National Marine Fisheries Service issued biological opinion concluding that FEMA's implementation in Region 10 of the insurance program jeopardizes the continued existence of 16 salmon and steelhead habitats, the endangered or threatened species and their habitats. In consultation with the Marine Fisheries Service and U.S. Fish and Wildlife, they've amended their requirements to the flood insurance program in Oregon, including a few changes to information provided to communities, mapping products, and reporting requirements for participating communities. FEMA also needs to ensure that these communities within the BIOP area adopt measures needed to avoid continued jeopardy and adverse modification, and collectively meet a standard of no net loss of habitat functions essential to the survival of these listed species. FEMA is developing a phasing strategy for these new requirements, but in the meantime, we have 3 options for pre-implementation compliance. In August, FEMA temporarily suspended the processing of letter of map revision and conditional letter of map revision applications that have to do with fill in the floodplain. And they are working with state hazard mitigation officers about buyout, about how to prioritize buyouts. And they are providing technical assistance to communities on adopting these pre-implementation compliance measures. At 1 o'clock today, I will be in a webinar training for one of the compliance measures, and then Wednesday there's another training with FEMA for one of the other ones. So more to come. At this point, we need to choose an option to proceed, and then we must meet the reporting requirements for these new options. Option 1 would be a moratorium on development in the floodplain. Local governments have some authority to do this, but FEMA does not. Option 2 would be to adopt the FEMA's model code that they've developed that integrates the Endangered Species Act requirements into the flood insurance program. And then option 3 is a permit by permit procedure where each applicant must meet the requirements of the Endangered Species Act and a habitat assessment guide. They have to put together a habitat assessment guide and submit an application that addresses all of the new requirements. This puts more of the responsibility onto the applicant to provide all of the required mitigation without something adopted into our code to guide them. However, FEMA has published a habitat assessment guidance document in conjunction with the Endangered Species Act, and their model code could be used as a guide for the cities to help cities review these proposals to meet the law. Timeline for implementation, we have to inform FEMA by December 1st which option we are choosing to go with. January 31st, we are required to begin collecting data on all of these items, and then July 31st, we have to fully implement our option. And then January 31st in 2026, we're required to report using their new reporting tool on all of the data that we've collected. A survey of all of the affected properties within our jurisdiction, 704 acres of developed property and 34.5 acres of undeveloped property. Which breaks down to number of parcels in each of the zoning districts are provided here. The greatest being 345 parcels of developed property in R18, for a total of 1,013 total residential properties in the floodplain, regulated floodplain. 34 of which are not developed yet. And then just a slide on the assessed improvement value by the Josephine County Tax Assessor's Office for each of these districts. And then for some context, in 2021, we had 3 completed developments with floodplain development permits. 2022, we had 8. 2023, we had 0. And 2024, we had 3. So that's kind of gives you some context on the volume that we have been seeing to date. This map just shows the regulated floodplain. The orange is the floodway, blue is floodplain, green is the non-regulated floodplain, and then overlaid on that is are the endangered species habitats. So next steps, council to select an option and we'll notify FEMA this month. In December, we'll draft a proposed code amendment to implement or to signal that option in our current floodplain development code, to be reviewed by the Planning Commission in February, and then before City Council in April. So today, the call to action is to consider the alternatives with a deadline of November 30th. And once again, these are the alternatives that are to be considered. And with that, if you have any questions about...
Yeah, thank you for the presentation and welcome.
Thank you.
Joel has a question over here.
Actually, I had several, and I don't want to I want to make sure the other counselors have the opportunity to respond as well. So thank you for your presentation. It was very professional.
Thank you.
There was some discussion on the Endangered Species Act with FEMA that this is kind of a government overreach. And at the League of Oregon Cities, I went to a presentation on it, and they presented another option, which I'm not sure that we would want to embrace. But that option would say, we believe this is a government overreach, and we're going to wait and not do any of these. Have you heard anything about that at all?
That specific action, no. I haven't,
Okay.
On that issue specifically. However, that sounds like something that would play out over many years in a
It certainly
legal
would.
framework.
Certainly would.
However, in the meantime, if we are going to be continuing to participate in the flood insurance program, we have to choose one of these options.
Yeah.
So we can opt to not be
Yeah.
in that program, but that would make flood insurance prices
And
go
that's
up
not
in the
really an
county.
option. They have a big hammer, is what I hear you saying.
Well, in order to participate in the program, which is optional,
Yeah.
the city opts to participate in that program, we have to choose one of these options. We can also voluntarily not comply or not participate in the flood insurance program.
Sure.
That's also an
Yeah,
option.
but that's a big benefit to our people.
Right.
So the other thing the other question I had was, the majority of our properties in the 100-year floodplain, which is a large area, and the riparian area outside of that, the reconstruction of those that are already developed, this affects that.
Yes, sir.
And so it affects it with terms of impervious area, in terms of fill, in terms of those other conditions that you've listed up there. That's somewhat concerning.
Definitely.
And the other thing being vegetation, not cutting any trees over 6 inches. If we let all the trees, even in the riparian area, grow up, they get overcrowded, and in the summertime, it becomes a definite fire hazard. All you got to do is ask any of the homeowners that,
Just to be clear, I
Yeah.
have not fully studied the
that's fine. That's fine. I don't expect
the
you
model
to.
code or the Endangered Species Act Habitat Mitigation Guide.
Yeah.
One of the, requests from the governor and senators and LOC is requesting an extension of this choice to
Right.
FEMA, which is still pending. So we're
It's
we're
kind of
operating
interesting.
under the assumption that they're not going to extend that deadline, but
It's kind of interesting because it's a very short deadline.
it's a very short deadline. However, my understanding, my basic understanding of it is that we will be collecting the data, and there are mitigation criteria. So it's not saying you cannot remove trees over 6 inches. It's saying if you do that, what is the effect and what are the mitigation steps that you're going to take? And so it's kind of, it's a complicated matrix.
You can remove trees over 6 inches, it just requires more paper.
Right. It's a more complicated review process, and it requires it requires analysis of the current situation and what the effect of the development is going to be, and what are the mitigation steps that you're going to take to achieve no net loss of habitat.
So just my thoughts, and I don't know everything. It's going to be litigated. It's going to be a while before it takes effect. There's especially over on the coast where the 100-year floodplain will take up 30% of the city. And when you talk about reconstruction and the effects on that, they said you could re-roof without a permit, but other than that, it required a permit. So this story is far from over. I think in the interim, we can look at some code. I would hesitate to put this on the back of a individual to come up with something from scratch. Obviously, there'll be some consultant that comes in and helps them do that, but come up with some code in the interim, tell them we're going to come up with some code and let this play out, and then see what happens. That would be what I would do.
Other questions for Lori? Valerie?
I don't think this is a question. I just want confirmation that, because you haven't really looked into the specifics of that Species Act or the other one. So basically, from my understanding, is they're basically giving us the option of number one, total, nothing can be built. Number two, go based on what we're recommending, or three, leave it up to the people to figure it out themselves. That's kind of the options.
Those
one,
are the
two, or
three options.
Right.
Yeah.
So as I believe, just kind of like Joel said, there's going to be a whole lot of pushback. There will be pushback from people. So I think, to me, the option two is the only one that makes any sense. But I'm just knowing it will not be a smooth road moving forward with this, just kind of knowing the costs that will be involved in all of it. But yet at the same time, you want people to be able to get flood insurance. So, they've kind of got you by the tail, basically. So that's my thoughts. It's just that clarified, pretty well spelled it out like it is correct. It's 1, 2, or 3, and basically they're using the hammer of saying, well, if you want flood insurance, then there needs to be something laid out. So anyway, that's my thoughts. This is option two would be the only way to actually go, but there will be pushback from when you get into, I would imagine, the urban area next April.
I think Rick has a question. Do you have a question? Okay, go ahead.
Welcome, Lori.
Thank you.
I'm somewhat familiar with this. I've been a land use consultant going on 50 years. So I get real concerned when I look at this. Can you go to slide 13? So I'm colorblind, so I'm having difficulty discerning the different things. But what I'm hearing being said is that even if it's floodplain, these regulations would apply for the different endangered species.
For the 100-year and the floodway, those are the regulated floodplain, but not the 500-year. We don't regulate that floodplain.
Right, but I'm talking about the 100-year floodplain.
Yes. Yes.
So I'm having difficulty because the only time the 100-year floodplain has water on it, it doesn't support the endangered species, or fish-wise, is this going beyond fish?
There are 16 species of threatened and endangered salmon and steelhead in their habitat. So from what I have read of the Endangered Species Act mitigation guide, it talks about how water quality after a flood event and how development affects water quality, which also affects habitat and habitat loss. Like for one example, removal of trees, there will be soil erosion for the habitat itself. And those are just some basic effects of development in the floodplain. So even though salmon are not living in the floodplain, when we develop in the floodplain, without thinking about the mitigation of what would happen during one of those 100-year floods or events, or the how that would affect the habitat of these endangered salmon and steelhead in the actual river, in their habitat. That's what this is working to address.
Okay, so in this process, do we have a way of protecting the home, as Joel was indicating, protecting the homeowner who's already there, especially, and now that we have a housing crisis, you know, we're talking about habitat for human beings, which is housing, and if we all of a sudden start taking housing away, when does a human being become an endangered species? But I guess I would like to see where we, as a governmental body, have a ability to provide a balance as we go forward on the regulations. Do we have the ability to do that?
I mean, well, this is a federal program, so if we evaluate the model code that FEMA has developed with the ESA, and there are opportunities in that model code to adjust to our particular environment without in compliance with the requirements, then we do have that option. That would be us developing, basically our own floodplain ordinance that complies with these new requirements.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Joel, did you have another question?
No, I'll just talk to you afterwards.
Oh,
Okay, thank you.
Does anybody else have any questions? All right.
I will have more information on the different options later on this week after I've done the FEMA workshop. So I'd be happy to give you kind of an update of what we talked about, or what they've talked about in those webinars.
Okay, yeah, that one's starting in 5 minutes.
Yep.
But so it sounds like you're not wanting us to give direction on one of these options today? You wanna
By
wait?
November 30th. So it's something for you to consider. The last slide is some resources. I'd be happy to also forward you if you want to read the technical documents of the Habitat Mitigation Guide or the model code and want to take a look at that. I can send that to you as well. And then, workshop it or on which direction to go.
Okay, Mark?
Mayor, members of City Council, just a couple points. One is, right, there has been letters submitted by the Governor's Office and local legislators to FEMA requesting an extension. We just don't know the outcome of that, and that extension may give us a little bit more time. However, between now and the end of this month, we do need to provide FEMA what direction we should take. It sounds like option one in terms of moratorium is off the table. Staff hasn't reviewed. That may very well lead to some sort of regulatory taking. We haven't reviewed that with our city attorney, but it's not a recommendation that we're wanting to make forward this morning. Option two and option three, adopting the model code. Our counterparts in Medford are choosing the permit by permit just to give them more time to evaluate whether or not they want to adopt the model code. So this morning, we can have to council, if it's the desire, that we can between option 2 and 3, we can provide a recommendation to the council at that point. As Lori finds out more information on what it would take to adopt the model housing code, or the model code versus the permit by permit. We just don't have enough information, but we know Medford is choosing the permit by permit, and we know other cities like Lake Oswego is adopting the model code. And then when we ask the DLCD in terms of outcomes in cities are scrambling just like you this week, making a determination of which of the following options. So I guess to summarize, by the end of the month, staff can provide you a recommendation between option 2 and option 3, and then we will notify FEMA, and that will meet our obligation by December 1st that we've chosen this direction. And by fiscal year next year, we'll have the adopted code language that we need.
Okay. Is everybody good with that? We'll come back at this before the end of the month with a recommendation from staff. Rick?
Lori, I know all these manuals are very thick, and you said you'll be looking at the endangered species and how that affects in here. Is that true?
The Habitat Mitigation Guide, which is a component of the review.
Is it appropriate for us to ask for you to put a short summary together of what you've observed in there?
Sure.
Then we don't have to read the thick one?
Yes, I can do that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Thank you.
Any further questions, comments? Any questions or comments before we wrap this up?
Okay.
Okay, we'll let you jump on your Zoom
Thank you.
meeting there and get back to us. All right. I think that brings us to agenda review. So we do have a meeting on Wednesday night. This week with a public hearing, a property line vacation on Agnes for the RV park. We have a resolution under council action items to amend the Housing Advisory Committee membership, a resolution that would amend the Affordable Housing Agreement, a motion for an SDC appeal for Hidden Valley RV, a resolution approving the Water Treatment Plant Pacific Power Service Agreement, a resolution approving temporary power service agreement, a resolution amending the ARPA allocations. Consent calendar has a resolution for a vehicle for purchase, a resolution for the water treatment plant landscape maintenance with Aspire, as well as the water restoration plant landscape maintenance with Aspire. A motion to accept the monthly investment report. And then under the URA, we have a couple of action items, a resolution that would award Rebecca Nugent, doing business as Dwell House, a building rehab URA grant, and a resolution awarding Scopa Properties LLC, a building rehab URA grant, and then appointing a couple of members to the Parks Committee and the Housing Advisory Committee. And then there is on November 12th, which I want to say is a Tuesday, does that sound right? Is the Urban Renewal Agency Community Forum 5-year plan. And then we have our next workshop on November 18th. Right now we have the resting place discussion regarding our homeless population on the 18th, and then a meeting on November 20th. Any questions about any of that? Rob?
So, it appears as if, on the consent agenda, on the water treatment plant and how we interact with Pacific Power and so forth, seems as though we're moving forward with construction of the plant, and still wondering if we're going to have the money to do that, and does it make sense to make decisions before we know if we have the funding?
So I'll briefly touch on the funding. As part of the presentations, neither of those are on consent. They're there for council action for you to decide on. We deliberately did not put those on consent for that reason. So we'll have more information, and then much more detailed information on December 2nd.
Any other questions?
I'm just clarifying that. So you're saying it's not under consent? Because it's under consent for what I'm looking at right here.
That's the
The
winds.
ones for Pacific Power are both on council action, and there's two separate actions.
Okay, I see what you're
One
saying.
is to
Okay.
authorize temporary power, and the second is for permanent.
Okay, thank you, I see it.
I just have a question about the URA Community Forum. What are we doing to publicize that? Does anyone know?
Know all the specifics that, of how we're reaching out, but I can gather that and send mayor council an email.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we do a press release and kind of get the word out as much as possible to invite people to that.
Certainly, yeah, we'll make sure that if that has not happened, that will happen, Mayor.
All right, anything else that anybody wants to have added on? Maybe going through the end of the year here, we just have 2 months left. Valerie?
Well, I did get an email or so, I think Rob brought forth an email today from the Christmas parade. I was just kind of curious as what was going on with that particular item. I read the email just right before I came, and I was curious as to, what has happened with the money from last year and this year. And anyway, I don't know if it needs to be on here, but just, it sounds like going forward, they need some direction.
Yeah, I'm drafting a memo for you, an email response for you. We did make payment March of 2024, did provide the $3,000 to U-Turn for Christ, contrary to what the email said.
Brian?
Do we need to take any action on that ARPA funding discussion before the end of the year with how we were going to structure that?
So that is on Wednesday's agenda, and that is also a council action item.
Perfect.
All right, anything else regarding the agenda? All right. DJ, you want to make the motion?
Move to adjourn.
Is there a second? Valerie, thank you. All in favor of adjourning today, say aye. Any opposed? All right, see you Wednesday night.